So in this final video, let's talk through the Council of Chalcedon. What comes out of the Council of Chalcedon is really the final important Christological statement of the early church period and really lays the final piece for thinking about who we are in relationship to God. Now, there's a whole lot of rivalry and dynamics between the church and the empire that lead to the Council of Chalcedon. One of these is the city of Rome in the 5th century is invaded several times. There's a number of civil wars that break out in the area, assassination of leading senators and other officials. And Rome actually is separated off from the empire in 476 as a result of Germanic invasions. The new Rome, as the title is given to Constantinople, elevates in prestige. And it's elevated above Alexandria, and bishops are recruited from Antioch. Alexandria, which remember that's where Cyril is, resists this sort of effort at imperial dominance by the Antiochian bishops in Constantinople. So this whole rivalry between Cyril and Nestorius is really a part of a wider realignment of the whole order of the Mediterranean world in this time period. There is a Council of Ephesus in the year 431 that sets up a lot of the tensions between Constantinople and Alexandria. Emperor Theodosius II calls this council the theology of Cyril, and the Alexandrian church is affirmed. The Christology of the Antiochian church is suppressed, and Nestorius is exiled. Then a whole new wave of actors come onto the scene. A new bishop arrives for Alexandria. His name is Dioscorus. A new bishop arrives for Constantinople. His name is Flavian. There's a new bishop of Rome, Leo I, or Leo the Great. And a new emperor comes on the scene, Marcian. Now, with his new actors on the scene, new controversies arise. So, for example, there's a disciple of Cyril, the school of Alexandria. His name is Eutyches. Eutyches teaches that Christ is homoousios with God. There's the same substance. But Jesus Christ is not homoousios with humanity, does not share the same full nature of humanity. That is, there is a higher, perfect human nature than our own human nature that Christ possesses. Flavian, the bishop of Constantinople, condemns Eutyches. Dioscorus, who's the bishop of Alexandria, defends him in honor of the teaching tradition of Cyril of Alexandria, and says Alexandria as a region is independent from Constantinople. Now, I have a map here on Populi also that helps you see all these different rival patriarchal sees, as we would call them. The See of Rome, the See of Alexandria, the See of Antioch, of Constantinople. So you could see how this is all a great big mess of rivalry. Dioscorus calls a council in Ephesus in 449 that opponents call the Robbers' Council. And at this council, Eutyches is affirmed and defended. The Bishop of Rome, Leo I, intervenes on this point on behalf of Flavian, who is the imperial patriarch in Constantinople. If this all confuses you, that is okay, because it actually created a lot of confusion in the ancient world too about which of these councils is actually authoritative. And so this is what takes us to the Council of Chalcedon in 451. This is, in a way, round two of Constantinople and Alexandria trying to sort things out. The Emperor Marcian calls this council in 451 to reverse the so-called Robbers' Council of Ephesus. And at Chalcedon, Eutyches, this Alexandrian position, is condemned. The position of Nestorius and Antioch is condemned, But the older position in Alexandria of Cyril's teaching is reaffirmed. So in a way, you can see this attempt to balance out the different regional rivalries at Chalcedon. What's important here is to focus in on the Orthodox Catholic dogma concerning the Incarnation. And we find this in Leo's tome written to Flavian, the Bishop of Constantinople. I want you to especially look in your PDF on page 363, number 3. That's really where his key argument rests about how we ought to understand who Jesus Christ is. There he argues that Christ has to take on human flesh and truly suffer in order to unite two things, the passible and the impassible. That is, that which changes and suffers, humanity, and that which never changes or suffers, that is, divinity. To Christ taking on flesh and suffering on the cross is the way of uniting those two things and addressing the human problem, which is death itself. So Leo would say that the Logos possesses two natures, human and divine, after the Incarnation. Now, if you shift to chapter 4 of Leo's tome, which you'd find on page 364 or 365 of your PDF, he introduces a really important concept called the communication of idioms. An idiom is a distinct thing, right? Like the way we say idiomatic speech, or a turn of phrase is an idiom. So he says there's two distinct natures, two idiomatic things that are fully in communication with each other. So there's a full humanity, one idiom, one nature, and a full divinity, another idiom or nature. And they're in full communication with each other so that only one united nature is perceived. So that when humans looked upon Jesus Christ, they saw humanity and divinity fully in cooperation. And so when we call on Jesus Christ, we call on fully the human and divine. So we only see the one person of Jesus Christ, who is fully human and fully divine. So communications of idiom is a concept to help us understand how both things can be happening at the same time. The human and the divine fully in connection. This leads us to the statement of the Council of Chalcedon of 451. This is in Coakley and Sterk. In here, the Council of Nicaea of 325 is affirmed. The Council of Constantinople of 381 is affirmed. The Niceno-Constantinopolitan Creed, the Orthodox formulation Cyril's second letter to Nestorius, and the Tome of Leo are all set forth as normative teachings for the Church. As well, the Council of Chalcedon disavows both Nestorius and Eutyches. That is, the extremes of Alexandria and Antioch, Constantinople, are pushed out, yet the writings of Cyril are amplified. And so then we come to something that we would call the Chalcedonian definition of the faith. This is a definition of who Jesus Christ is. This is on page 176 of Coakley and Sterk. I'm going to read this aloud and you can follow along. So starting from the top, it says, following the Holy Fathers, we teach, that is, this council teaches, with one voice, that the Son of God and our Lord Jesus Christ is to be confessed as one and the same person, that he's perfect in godhood and perfect in manhood or humanity, very God and very man, or truly God and truly human, of a reasonable soul and human body, consisting, consubstantial with the Father, as touching his godhood, and consubstantial with us as teaching his manhood. So fully human, fully divine, fully possessing divinity like God possesses, and fully possessing our humanity like we possess. So they're saying Eutyches' Christology is not permissible. So he's made in all things like unto us, only sin excepted, begotten of his Father before the worlds according to his godhood. But in these last days for us and for our salvation born to the world of the Virgin Mary, according to his manhood. This one and the same Jesus Christ, the only begotten Son of God, now pay attention, must be confessed to be in two natures, unconfusedly, immutably, indivisibly, inseparably, united, and that without the distinction of natures being taken away by such union, but rather the peculiar property of each nature being preserved and being united in one person substance, not separated or divided into two persons, but one, the same Son and only begotten God, the Word, our Lord Jesus Christ. There's a lot going on in that definition, and you should spend some time trying to break that definition down and making further sense of it. But here are some things that I want to lay out for you as key concepts. What they're trying to mediate is between two concerns. That is, they want to say that Jesus Christ is in two natures and united in one person. So these two natures, these two fusi, are united in one hypostasis. So they're trying to avoid what Nestorius is saying is that there's a real distinctiveness between these on the one hand. And avoid what Eutyches is trying to do is saying his humanity has to be different from ours in order to be fully divine. So as a result, there's an emphasis that Jesus Christ is homoousios with the Father and Godhead, and homoousios, or of the same nature or same substance as us in our humanity. And there's not a mixing of these things. There's not a confusion of these things. There's not a division or a separability of these things. The incarnation hangs together with a particular kind of integrity. So that trying to untangle it to say one element is more important than the other, or it can't be the fullness of one thing or the other, of the humanity or the divinity, takes away from the point. That is, this fullness of union, these two natures of human and divine united in the one person of Jesus Christ, is what affects our salvation in itself. So I want to close with a quote from Gregory of Nazianzus, one of the Cappadocian fathers, who I think helps summarize this in a single sentence. He writes in his epistle number 51, "For that which he, Jesus Christ, has not assumed or taken on, Jesus Christ has not healed. But that which is united to his Godhead is also saved." That is, Christ can't save aspects of ourselves unless Christ fully takes them on. Christ has to have a fullness of the human nature and a fullness of the divine nature so that all of us are healed. But since he's united to the Godhead, to the fullness of divinity, somehow by taking us up into his life, we are also healed and brought close to God. I have one last image that I have on Populi for you for this week, which is this image of Christ the physician. This is actually an image from the late Middle Ages, I think from Flemish or German in origin. And it's Christ in an apothecary shop, writing out a prescription for humans, for Adam and Eve, our original parents, the sign of our broken nature. And he is healing them. I think this is an apt image to close on, to show what the Chalcedonian formula, this definition of faith is trying to get at. It's not just words for words' sake. It's really trying to talk about how we are saved. And it points to our fundamental worth and dignity. And it points to God's desire for us, which is not simply to fix us or simply to control us, but actually to invite us into the very life of God. I hope that's a good way for you to end this week. I'll be talking to you soon. Bye.